It's been 20 years since Peter Jackson's genre-defining and multi-award-winning Lord of the Rings trilogy hit cinemas and changed the world of cinema forever. What keeps audiences coming back for more rewatches, marathons, and extended cuts time and time again is the richness and detail crafted into every part of the production of each movie. Today, we're going to guide you through some of the hidden details and Easter eggs of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, so you can tell your friends something else besides Viggo Mortensen breaking his toe that one time. Gandalf's staff's secret compartment. Let's start with one for the eagle-eyed amongst you. And no, I'm not referring to Gway here. Gandalf the Grey may be a timeless mystical wizard, but he, like the rest of us, loves nothing more than to sit down and smoke some well-earned pipeweed. But if you're a wise nomad like Gandalf, what's the most convenient place to store your pipe so you can smoke at a moment's notice? Your satchel? No, that's too easy. Clearly, the answer is to wedge it comfortably into your wizard staff, ignoring the fact that that spot used to house a healing crystal, and the staff itself was a hand-me-down from Radagast the Brown. Hardcore fans can spot that Gandalf saw an opportunity to minimize the time it took him to light up a smoke, and added his pipe and pipe tamper to his staff, branding it with that little bit of Stormcrow flair. The origin of Arwen's sword. One of the many famous scenes in The Fellowship of the Ring is when Lady Arwen of Rivendell arrives to try to save Frodo from his Morgul wound by rushing him on horseback past the Black Riders. This scene culminates in a final standoff between Arwen and the Ringwraiths, where Arwen draws her sword before summoning a flood of water horses to wash them all away. Just everyday elf things. But that confrontation isn't actually the first appearance of her sword in the movie. Her sword, Hadafang, actually appears earlier in the hands of her father, Elrond, in the movie's prologue. Elrond wields Hadafang during the last alliance of elves and men, as well as the entirety of the Hobbit trilogy. Translating to Throng Cleaver, the sword was intended to bear a description, claiming it belonged to Elrond's grandmother, Idril, further implying the sword is handed down from generation to generation. Enjoying the list so far? How about giving us a like and subscribing to Trender for more content like this? Sam's daughter. Let's jump ahead now to not only the very last scene in the movie trilogy, but also the very last scene in the book. Sam's return to his home after a very teary goodbye to Frodo. After saving the world and saying goodbye to his closest friend, Sam returns home to his wife Rosie and his daughter Eleanor before taking a deep breath and saying he's back. Peter Jackson and company had an inspired idea to give the movie version of this scene more poignant weight, and had Sam's daughter Eleanor be played by Sean Astin's actual daughter in real life, Alexandra. This extra layer doesn't just feel like a cameo for the sake of a cameo, instead adding a richer texture and warmth to what is pivotally an audience's last window in the most recent point of the Middle-earth saga. Viggo Mortensen's badass reflexes. Back to the Fellowship of the Ring for the next piece of trivia. The movie's climax reaches its apex when Aragorn, son of Arathorn, fights off the Uruk-hai forces after their violent tirade, which ultimately results in the death of Boromir. During the one-on-one fight with the Uruk's monstrous leader Lurtz, Lurtz pulls a knife out of his thigh and throws it right at Aragorn, which Aragorn manages to deflect with his sword just in time. As legend goes, that knife throw was an accident, and Aragorn's actor Viggo acted quickly enough to save himself from dire harm. That being said, the real story is less dramatic, but no less cool. By all official accounts, that scene was intended to happen as we saw it. Peter Jackson described the scene in the movie's commentary as being played perfectly by Viggo. But what Jackson emphasizes is that the knife being thrown at Viggo is a real, non-prop knife that he had to bat away completely with his own reflexes, with not a single piece of computer enhancement in the scene besides when Aragorn retaliates and slices off Lurtz's arm. Long story short, Viggo Mortensen is cooler than you or I will ever be. The Vambraces. Speaking of Boromir's tragic demise, another often missed detail happens right towards the end of Fellowship of the Ring. After Boromir's almost Nordic-style funeral, we briefly see a shot of Aragorn adjusting his Vambraces. In a blink-and-you'll-miss-it detail, it turns out Aragorn is not adjusting his Vambraces, but is actually equipping Boromir's. The giveaway is a split-second appearance of the White Tree of Gondor emblem emblazoned on it. This moment wasn't originally scripted to happen. Boromir's actor Sean Bean explained in the cast commentary that it was originally Viggo Mortensen's idea on set. Sean went on to say that Aragorn wears them for most of the subsequent films, serving as a beautiful reminder of Boromir's sacrifice and influence on Aragorn's new character trajectory from that point. Beginning to accept he will have to claim his birthright as Gondor's king. The Cartoon Homages. 23 years before Peter Jackson's massive live-action epic graced our screens, audiences had 1978's animated Lord of the Rings adaptation to satiate their Middle-earth appetite. Directed by Ralph Bakshi, his version of Rings incorporated an ambitious hybrid of traditional animation and rotoscoped live-action. While it can be looked at as a novelty nowadays, when we have the scale of New Zealand to compare it to, at the time, Bakshi's Lord of the Rings movie was a financial success. While it didn't culminate in the sequel he wanted, its influence didn't go ignored by the makers of the live-action incarnation. In Jackson's trilogy, the scene where the four hobbits quickly jump off the side of the road to hide from the oncoming Black Rider before cowering behind a large tree is taken directly from the '78 version. If you line up the two shots side by side, you'll see Jackson had no qualm with evoking the feel of his movie's forgotten cousin. This isn't the only time Peter Jackson attempted to mirror a shot from Ring's animated counterpart. At Bilbo's 111th birthday party in the Fellowship of the Ring, we're introduced to a wide cast of other hobbits that live in the Shire. From Sackville Baggins to Boffins, one such character is Odo Proudfoot. This memorable one-liner serves as a great throwaway comedy beat in Jackson's version, but is in actuality a lot more designed than that. Jackson and Lord of the Rings trilogy director of photography Andrew Lesnie frame Odo in the exact same way Odo is framed in Bakshi's version. Gigantic feet close to the camera, with the rest of him laying back smoking his pipe. Refusing to pretend his version of Rings is the only one, major Rings fans will appreciate all his nods to the past. Peter Jackson's cameos. Long before Stan Lee started cameoing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Peter Jackson squeezed himself into little parts throughout the Lord of the Rings trilogy. His first appearance is in the Fellowship of the Ring, right after the hobbits first arrive in Bree. As we look through the rainy and wet streets, a drunken man shuffles out of a pub and chomps down on a carrot. Later claimed by the Middle-earth role-playing card game to be a man named Albert Drury, Peter Jackson makes this cameo again in the second Hobbit movie, The Desolation of Smaug, and given that the scene takes place a few decades before the Lord of the Rings cameo, we personally think he's much more likely to be Tom Bombadil. His Two Towers cameo a year later is a lot more active. This time, during the epic battle of Helm's Deep, Pete gets a shot exclusively of himself as a Rohan soldier covered in chainmail chucking a spear at an Uruk-hai warrior trying to attack Helm's Deep. In The Return of the King, Peter Jackson relegated his cameo to extended cut only, appearing as one of the Corsairs of Umbar, whose ships get hijacked by Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, right after being shot and killed by Legolas after Gimli nudges his bow. The only other cameo Jackson makes in the Lord of the Rings trilogy doesn't involve him acting on screen, but involves his appearance. In Fellowship of the Ring, during the opening scenes in Bag End in the Shire, portraits of Bilbo's father, Bungo Baggins, can be seen hanging from the walls. The paintings of Bungo and his wife, Belladonna, are based on a beardless Peter Jackson and his wife and Lord of the Rings screenwriter Fran Walsh. That's it from us. Now it's time to hear from you. Have you heard any of these details before? Would you like more lists like this? Let us know in the comments below. Before you go, please give us a like and subscribe to Trender to keep up to date on our content, and click the bell to make sure you never miss a video.